enough for the non-financial types. But supply chain finance, interestingly enough, is something that baffles even the finance professionals. So I like to describe it very simply as follows. There are two parties involved. There is a large company, let's call them the anchor entity. He's buying from a supplier. So you've got a supplier, you've got the anchor entity. The supplier is going to be paid in about 90 days' time. Typically, the supplier needs the money sooner than that. So what he does is he goes to a bank and he says, can I get the money maybe 30 days earlier? And the bank says, fine, but instead of giving you $100 off the sale, I'll actually give you only $99. So effectively, it's costing the supplier 1% to get the money 1 month earlier. That's what we call phase one, right? Over time, what happens is that the anchor client and the supplier say that why are we paying a certain amount to the bank in between? So what the anchor client says is, okay, I will give you your funds 30 days before time, and let's share some of the upside that we were giving the bank. We call that phase two. Then you've got phase three, which is platforms like trades, where the supplier, the anchor entity, and a bunch of finance companies, they all come and exchange data with each other. So effectively what happens is that various financing companies, they find that the amount of funding that's needed, the period of time that it's needed for the start and the end time of the financing window is such that it matches well with surplus funds they may have. So it ends up being an even better value for all parties concerned. How do the costs of financing compare across these three different models? Roughly speaking, phase one can be as high as 15% annualized, 12 to 15% is typical. Phase two drops to something like 10%. And by phase three, you can actually get financing at the rate of about 8% annualized. If you compare that with the higher end of phase one, it's almost a drop of 50%. So it's a huge benefit. How does India compare with the other countries? So share of GDP is actually a very reasonable way to think about how much has supply chain finance penetrated into the GDP, right? Now, amongst the best countries who do a great job of that tend to be the Western European countries. India, unfortunately, is absolutely at the bottom of the pile. The percentage of GDP that is addressed by supply chain financing, as well as the absolute amount of supply chain financing. Why is it so difficult? And there's a very interesting analysis that's been done by the US Small Business Administration. And that's basically a version of the prisoner's dilemma, right? So if you are a large company, you have to choose whether to pay your smaller suppliers early, on time, or late. The way the prisoner's dilemma resolves itself is that if both of us follow the constructive path of enabling supply chain finance, the net value in the economy is much better. But because I'm worried about me doing the right thing and he not doing the right thing, neither of us end up doing the right thing. When that happens, why does it harm the rest of the economy? Well, the first thing is that if you don't allow more liquidity in the system, the disproportionate impact tends to be on the smaller companies. The micro enterprises have a much higher percentage of their costs, tends to be fixed costs, which are basically labor and rental costs. So not only does it cost them more, it hurts them harder. The flip side is also true. If you actually unlock the liquidity in the system, the disproportionate benefit comes to the micro enterprises. So we looked at the growth in net sales and what happens to the growth in net sales if the working capital days that these companies have to pay reduces. For micro enterprises, the growth in net sales goes from 5% to 14%, almost 3 times the growth over the same kind of working capital improvement. Compare that with large companies, it goes from about 10 to 18%, which is about an 80% improvement. So it's good for everyone, but it benefits the micro enterprises more than you'd expect for medium and large organizations. With that, what is it that the large companies need to do to unlock the liquidity in the system and facilitate supply chain financing? It basically comes down to three things. The people tend to have more of a mindset that suppliers and vendors are actually partners. Number two, the processes need to be a little bit more automated, and the speed with which procurement to payment is as fast as it can be. And thirdly, the systems need to be very automatic. Well, there's a huge value in supply chain financing. It could be as low as a 50% drop in the cost of working capital, right? The initiator of this is always going to be the large companies, and it tends to be the large companies that start the process. In case they do it, it helps in terms of growth in net sales, and disproportionately for the smaller enterprises that has further benefits for the large companies. But if they don't do it, it raises the cost of financing so much that it cripples the entire system.